In Windows 10, most of your common configuration options are going to be found in the Settings app. They can be located there by browsing, or they can be located there via searching using Cortana. The Settings app is going to be divided into various sections, and it's these sections, along with the built-in search function, that make it pretty easy to locate the option that you're going to need. But it's a new app, it's an enhanced app. I know we briefly looked at it by way of demo, but as IT pros, we need to know where things are here so that we can direct users to them. And because this is a new and enhanced app, it's also a potential target for some questions, on the exam. And you might find yourself knowing where to go in Control Panel, but that's not one of the options in your list of answers. And that'll sometimes happen, right? There are a lot of places where in Windows there are more than one way to do something. And Microsoft will happen to be asking about a particular way of doing it. And so all I'm saying is this exam, like the other exams, when a product first comes out, especially, they really hit on the new features, and they want to know that you know the new features. Why? Because it distinguishes your knowledge from knowledge of that of Windows 7, Windows 8. If they asked about Control Panel applets that haven't changed, then, it doesn't necessarily show that you have any knowledge of Windows 10. But if they ask about the new things in Windows 10, then they're focusing on that, okay? So that's just a little side note to say we've got to focus in on what's new. That's what's going to be important on the test. Doesn't mean we don't go over anything that is consistent with older versions, because to be an IT professional, everybody has to be on the same page. We have to know how to use all of the tools, but a lot of times the focus on the test, if there's more than one way to do things, will be on the new thing. So let's start now by looking at the Settings app. The Settings app, as I said, was broken into different sections, and over the next few slides, what we're going to talk about is just each of those sections and kind of identify what's there. I know we've seen it, and we briefly went through these different sections. We'll take a quick look again, but I'll be showing you some of the search functions and whatnot. So in System, you have a number of different things. This is where you would go to modify your display, the resolution, the layout, those things. The notifications and actions was where we would go to configure the updates that are sent and which applications are able to send those updates. Apps and features, just list out the applications that you have installed. Your multitasking settings were the snap settings and how you wanted that multitasking experience to be. Turning on tablet mode would go full screen on the apps and would eliminate the taskbar. Power and sleep was configuring your power options. On all of these, you also, remember, had a link to get into the more advanced configuration options found in Control Panel. Storage was, the ability to analyze the current storage, the current hard drives that you've got, what's being stored on them, where is that actual data. Not only where is the data, but what type of data is it. And we had some information about offline maps, just making a little bit more pertinent on a phone or a tablet, but you could download maps. And then default apps and deciding what's going to happen for particular file types. What app is going to be associated with certain file types. And so, yes, there's something there that is in Control Panel as well. It's in Control Panel under Programs and Features, but in the Settings app, it's in the System section. The next section is the Devices section. This is where we would go to view printers and scanners that were installed. You can also install a printer or scanner in this way. You can just connect a device, which if it's a USB device, it'll show up under Connected Devices. Anything connected via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi would also show up in this particular area. So USB, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, they're all going to show up as connected devices. If you had a projector, it would show up as a connected device here. We had the mouse and touchpad settings, which is pretty straightforward. Control Panel options for doing that, but you can configure mouse click speed, double click speed, things like that, as well as touchpad settings in that area. And we have typing, which was autocorrect configurations, autoplay, what's going to happen when you insert USB devices, what's going to happen when you insert a camera card or an SD card, for instance. You know, and it depends on what you've got installed. If I remember correctly, we saw this, and because I had Dropbox installed, a cloud-based storage solution, it had automatically made itself the default. We can go in and tweak it and say, this is exactly what I want to do when I plug in this type of external device. Network and internet is the location you're going to go for anything related to network connectivity. So we have Ethernet, which allows you to get into the properties and see the status of your local area network connection. You would have Wi-Fi that would be listed if you had a wireless adapter. Okay. And we also just had data usage. We had a couple remote access, so we go there to create and manage VPN connections, to create and manage dial-up connections, and then to configure proxy server settings. In some organizations, you're going to require a proxy server to get out to the internet. That is a way of filtering web requests. It's a way of configuring time limits. It's a way of blocking certain domains. You know, all of those are reasons why proxy servers get used, but the browsers often have to be configured with the proxy server. And so you would go into this area and configure it. Now, mind you, you go into this area and configure it. You could also just go into internet options, which is kind of the old way of doing it, but we want to know that the proxy server settings are within the network and internet section here in the settings app. Personalization is one where you're going to go in and change the look and the feel. Okay, so in system you had display settings, but it was really the, you know, are we looking at landscape, portrait? Are we flipping the view? What's the resolution going to be? The color saturation, you know, that kind of thing. Personalization is where you go to get themes, to configure backgrounds, to configure the pictures on your lock screen and the start menu, you know, all of those kinds of things. How does it cosmetically look? What are the accent colors? What are, you know, all of that stuff is going to be in the personalization category. The accounts category is going to have information about your account. You can modify your profile picture. You can modify if it's linked to a Microsoft account or not. You'll have the sign-in options depending on the capabilities of the system. This is where we would see the Windows Hello and the Microsoft Passport. We have the ability to connect to a work account. You'd be plugging in an email address. It would go through some form of auto-discover trying to locate your organizational servers. That works great with Office 365 and Azure. If you have it on a local on-premises environment, then there are some additional things that have to be set up. You have the ability to add family and other users. When you add family, we have the ability to restrict, say, children in a home environment to certain times of day, to certain applications. It gives them their own sign-on, therefore giving them their own documents, but also allowing us to produce reports on what they're doing on the computer and the like. Okay? And then you can choose what settings get synced when you're using a Microsoft account and you log on to this system across multiple computers. So anything related to your user account, your user profiles, other accounts on that system, any of that is going to be in this accounts section. We have time and language. The time and language area is where you configure your date and time, your time zone, and what the date and time is. It's also where you get into any of the region and language options. So changing, you can modify the languages that are used by Windows itself. This is also where we would go for speech recognition, and that's the only one that's seems a little bit out of place, but I guess it has to do with language. You know, so you go in and configure microphone settings and speech recognition there. The ease of access is all your accessibility controls, so sticky keys, the visible keyboard, playing sounds when instead of displaying error messages, or those, or vice versa. So instead of system sounds, you're displaying a message for those who are hearing impaired. Anything having to do with making the computer easier for somebody who might be in some way impaired is all going to be in the ease of access. And then the privacy controls, you remember, was this huge section dealing with what kind of information is shared with Microsoft, what kind of information and what apps can share that data. those kinds of things. So you can go in and modify those if somebody is concerned about what is being shared. Then we have update and security. It was in this section that we saw Windows Defender, the anti-spyware program, as well as antivirus program for Windows 10. Also Windows Update, where we would go to receive updates that Microsoft had released for the operating system as well as for software. You've got a backup section, and you've got a recovery section. The recovery section, we have the ability to revert back to previous version for 30 days, and in the recovery section, we also have the reset your PC option. Okay. This is also where you would go to activate your system. If your system had not been activated, you have a 30-day window after install to be able to activate. Okay, let's take a look at the settings app. I know we have come here before, so we're not going to spend a ton of time, but you see how it is laid out, and also the find a setting. And I don't recall if I talked about this before. So if you're looking for something, desktop themes, just search, and what you're going to see is the options here. Change a theme. Now, this took me to Control Panel, okay, versus the other would have taken me to the themes and related settings here. Now, how do you know the difference? Well, you know the difference because of the icon. So anytime this icon shows up in the search, okay, so network I type in, right? I've got this icon, then it's taking me to the settings app. You've got some other icon, then it's going to be taking you into Control Panel. Now, does it really matter? I mean, where you go? No, from a practical standpoint, it doesn't matter. You can manage it whichever way you want. If I want to join the domain, for instance, I can rename it, join the domain here. So let me type in domain. So rename PC or join the domain, or join the domain. Which one do you want to do? Well, I'm probably going to keep using the system properties. It's just what I've done for 15 years. Use the system properties to join the domain. It's what I'm familiar with. But it also doesn't matter. If I want to go in and do it that way, I can do it that way. So it's 6 in one and half dozen in the other. But from the test perspective, the reason I'm focusing so much on the settings app is because it seems that they are gradually working more and more into this app. Now, I don't know at what point Control Panel will go away, if ever, but it would be more likely for them to ask about doing, or to provide an answer that has you doing it in the settings app than doing it in Control Panel. Or maybe you need to know both. Okay? So, but do you have that search capability within the settings app? And you also have that search capability here. If you just join a domain, okay, and join a domain in the Control Panel was the #1 hit, and rename your PC or join a domain here with the little settings icon was the #2 hit. Okay? And that was just because I used that particular verbiage. If I just type domain, then I'm going to get the different options. All right. So when in doubt, just search. Once you've located it, though, and as you're preparing for the exam, we want to identify exactly where in the settings app these various things are going to be located. From a practical standpoint, it doesn't matter that you know that, but for the exam, you're not going to have the ability to search, and you're going to be provided with different options as to where something's located. So it's a good idea to know it. Okay, so we won't go back through all of the, each of those sections, because I know we demoed that before in the settings app. I wanted to focus on the search, and I did want to go back and mention many of them because it's a new thing. And because it's a new thing, it's very important for us to understand for the purposes of the exam.